Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome to another video for EVE Echoes from inside the April Balance Update test server. Now, one of the big changes that's coming in the April Balance Update is a change to a lot of the low slot passive modules. I've already kind of covered this in a video looking at how this should be a buff, overall not a nerf, but now that we are inside the test server, I can actually showcase these modules side by side as they're going to be with what they currently are on live. Or at least I say what they're going to be. Remember, feedback can be given to the developers, so if you think something's not enough of a change, or if it's too much of a change, you can go into the feedback form, which I will link in the description of this and every other one of the test server videos, and you can give your feedback to the developers there. As I mentioned in my previous video looking at how to use the test server, please do try and keep feedback relevant, and I know some people are going to just use this as an opportunity to troll the developers, but please, I would ask you not to do that simply because there's going to be so much information to go through anyway, and it's going to be difficult to weed out what is genuine and what is just people trolling. Anyway, if you're enjoying these videos and enjoying finding out more about the test server, hit like on this one, let me know in the comment section below, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel to see more of this kind of stuff. All that said and done then, let's jump right into talking about these different passive low slot modules and how they look set to be changed. We'll start with shield extenders because they are quite literally top of the list, and I'm going to go down to the Patriot medium shield extender. I've taken a load of screenshots on the live server as well. So first things first, if we look at these two side by side, I'm going to say now that literally everything is the same with the exception of the shield increase and the additional shields upon activation, and of course the reactivation delay. The power grid requirement, the activation cost, all of this is exactly the same, but the shield increase on the live server currently is 2,358, whereas the passive shield increase here is 3,302. That is literally almost an additional 1,000 hit points that this is going to be giving you passive. Now, even if you look at having the old extender, if you're not activating the extender, then that's already a big buff. And ultimately as well, the fact is that you're not going to be activating the extender for the largest part of its duration. Even if you look at the previous versions, 25 seconds on, 60 seconds off, that's almost a 3-to-1 ratio, which means if you buff the passive by 1% and nerf the active by 3%, that would be balanced. Or if you buffed the passive by 5%, and nerfed the active by 15%, they would pretty much balance out. As it stands though, that is a massive buff to the passive shield increase. Again, that is 2,358 up to 3,302. Now the additional shields upon activation as well has also gone up from 2,358 to 2,987. This means that when you activate the module, you still get a decent chunk. What has gone from this now, though, is the hidden percentage bonus. Now, this is one of those things that requires a little bit of explaining for those who didn't necessarily know. Essentially, shield extenders have a passive 18%. It's around about 18% additional bonus when activated, and that relies on the actual ship that it's fitted to. Obviously, a ship with bigger shields will get a bigger bonus from that 18%, because 18% of a bigger number is bigger than 18% of a smaller number. Hopefully that should make mathematical sense. What this meant was you could put 3 extenders onto something like a Nightmare and get upwards of 25,000 hit points on an activation. You'd activate it for 25 seconds and you'd get 25,000 additional hit points that are above your standard shield. Now, if they didn't break that, or ultimately even if they did break that, only what they did beyond that 25,000 was actual damage to the Nightmare, and the second that that 25 second ended, you would then just activate the next extender, and thus you'd get another 25,000 EHP that people have got to get through before actually damaging the Nightmare. Then when that one fades off, you've got the third one that you could activate for another buffer of 25,000 hit points that they have to get through before they're damaging the Nightmare. And by the time that one's finished, the first one, because it only had a 60-second cooldown, is now ready to be used again. Ultimately, any minor damage that the Nightmare did take on its own actual shields would then just be healed up easily by a couple of logistics vessels parked nearby. It was a big problem. This is why the drone meta became the whole drone dive meta, because you needed to find ways to get inside the shields to actually damage other ships, and breaking a nightmare has just been ridiculous. That's why we're getting changes to drones, it's why we're getting changes to extenders, it's why we're getting changes to the shield field module as well, and we'll cover that in like a different video, the shield field module. There's a lot to talk about on that one. So for the main part here, if you are using just 1 or 2 extenders in order to make your passive shields bigger, you're going to be getting a buff out of this. If you are using 1 or 2 extenders, then that is a big buff to you for your passive shields. For me, who likes to occasionally have a fit where I'm using a shield booster and an extender side by side, I've got bigger shields now than I had before. The boosters actually are fantastic as well. Again, that's another topic for another video. They're doing really well. It's a brilliant change. And you're actually getting a nice bit of survivability, and the actual boost is really nice to the shield extenders. It now works as a really nice emergency, like, oh no, I'm about to take a whole lot of damage, let's activate that and get some shield buffers up while my shield booster repairs my shields underneath. It twins really well for that kind of fit. What it has done now, especially since the reactivation delay has gone from 60 seconds to 180 seconds, 3 times as long now, this now means that if you were stacking extenders to try and active tank, in inverted commas, using extenders, that has now been nerfed, and it has been nerfed heavily. That is a nerf that needed to happen for large-scale fleet PvP. For the average player, this is actually going to be a buff, especially if you're only using 1 or 2 of the extenders. It's only if you were using 3 or more, sort of like as a stack, that this is a nerf. And this then is very much the same truth for armor plates. Let's go down to armor plates because I've taken a screenshot of the Hansen 800. And if we have a look at this one side by side, again, everything here pretty much is exactly the same. The mass increase, the power grid requirement, activation cost, all of these are exactly the same. What has now changed is the armor increase, the additional armor upon activation, and the reactivation delay. Again, the reactivation delay has gone from 60 seconds all the way up to 180 seconds. That is actually a massive increase there. So yeah, that's, again, it's one of those things, if you're stacking these, you're not going to be able to use them as frequently. But if we have a look at the armor increase, the armor increase passively has gone from 2,673 on live to 4,958 here on the test server. That's almost double the passive armor increase. That's humongous. Now, admittedly, there is a point to note here that the additional armor upon activation has gone down. That's gone from 2,673 down to 1,431. What this essentially means here is that, again, you've got a massive, and it's almost doubled, it's a massive increase to your passive, which for armor tanking is kind of the point of plates. These are passive, you fit this to a ship, and you're getting nearly 5,000 additional hit points just for fitting one of these. Yes, okay, the additional armor upon activation is a lot lower, and the percentage boost has gone as well, so it is just that 1,431 now. Ultimately, that has had a substantial nerf to the active. It means if you need to buff your armor, then ultimately you're not getting as much out of a plate as you were before when you activate it. But again, if you're just using it as a passive module, it's a significant buff. In the case of the reinforced steel plates here, this is a bit more hit and miss. Some people are going to absolutely love this. A lot of the armor stuff that I've been using recently uses twin reps and a couple of resistances. I may now actually swap out resistances for reinforced plates because that additional armor increase there, that passive bonus, is just insanely good. Sad to see that the additional armor has actually gone down on these rather than, you know, up, especially since they're losing the scaling as well. The scaling I get needed to go, but the additional armor upon activation going right the way down and the reactivation delay going right the way up does mean that the activation of this is really not quite as special as it used to be. I suppose on the flip side though, that does actually give us a bit more of a reason to use damage control units on particular ships. But again, that's kind of here nor there. It's, you know, that's up to you. This would be one of those ones that I actually ask you guys, what do you think about this change? I like the change to extenders, and personally, I really like the change here to plates. I think that armor increase is fantastic. I think that really, actually, the passive armor increase is fantastic. That's exactly how I personally use plates, so it's a big buff to me on the ships that I use them, but I get that the additional armor upon activation going right down could put some folks off. I don't know, I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions here. Let's have a look at capacitor batteries. This is... Vetamune was like weeping about this earlier. Let's have a look at how these actually stand up side by side. Now again, power grid requirement, the activation time, these are exactly the same here. And the additional capacitor upon activation is actually the same as well. So when you activate a capacitor battery, a Gistom C-type medium capacitor battery here, it will give you an additional 1093 gigajoules into your capacitor. Now again, with capacitor batteries, the percentage scaling has gone, which quite frankly, again, I can see why they needed to do that, especially on certain Amar ships. It just gave such a humongous dump of capacitor that it was quite frankly dumb. It meant if someone came up to you with a neutralizer, you could just activate a battery and tank through that neutralizer. Ultimately, if you had multiple batteries, you could just stack them. Again, 25-second activation time, 60-second cooldown, meant that if you had 2 or 3 batteries, you could pretty much avoid the effects of a neutralizer. When I was talking to Zyklon about the Rupture video that I did recently, because that used a lot of capacitor warfare, neutralizing their capacitor, that kind of thing, one of the things he pointed out was avoid ships that are likely to have more than 1 battery, because you just will not break it. And that to me was kind of dumb. Really kind of just not great design, that a battery could just ignore, basically, being neutralized by a larger ship. This means capacitor warfare is going to be more useful. If you're flying the Cruor, the Ashimu, or the Balgon, you're probably going to be getting a little bit more bang for your buck out of your neutralizers than you were before. Heck, if you're flying anything using neutralizers, they're going to be more effective than they were before, because you are actually going to be able to eventually break their capacitor. That said, however, if you look at the capacitor increase here, it is now 1093 gigajoules passive capacitor increase, whereas it was only 683 before. That is a massive increase to your capacitor. That means that ships that were sort of not quite capacitor stable, put a battery on it now, and it will become passively stable. It just now means that when you start getting neuted, you're going to be more resistant to that neuting, but you're not just going to be able to ignore it by activating multiple batteries. Once again, the sort of the pro and con of this nerf is that if you use 1 battery to try and get yourself closer to capacitor stability, it is going to be better than it was before. If you were using multiple of these to try and avoid neutralizers, that's not going to work anymore. So it's a buff for people who are using like 1 of these just to help, you know, stabilize a build, but it's a nerf to anyone who is using it as a way to kind of counteract capacitor warfare. I'm actually quite excited about this. For PvE players, that's a really big boost, and it means that you can quite easily make things that weren't quite cap stable. That's a big boost, especially for things like some of the battle cruisers that are just verging on capacitor stability, and you just want that little bit of a kick more. They're now actually going to have it, and I like that change. It also means, as I said, PvP is getting a bit of a mix-up, and it's going to be much more aggressive on capacitor warfare, which I'm all for. Now finally, of these particular changes, let's go down to the weapon upgrades. This is pretty much the same across the board, so I'm going to look at a gyro stabilizer, because of course these are the ones I'm personally most familiar with as a cannon main. So here we have a Gistom C-type gyro stabilizer. As with the other modules, the power grid requirement, the activation cost, the activation time, all of that remains exactly the same. What has now changed is the damage bonus, the reactivation delay, the activation time adjustment, and the activation time adjustment when activated. It's also lost its damage bonus. So if we compare these side by side, the passive damage bonus has gone from 5% all the way up to 9%. That is now a much bigger passive DPS. If you use a gyro stabilizer or a heatsink or a magnetic field stabilizer, ballistic control unit, or drone damage amplifier on a ship, its cold DPS has just gone up. And if you ignored everything else, again, this means that you're going to be getting a buff for those. The simple fact is, again, most of these modules are used more in the passive state than they are in the active state. So if you buff the passive state, you are getting a buff on them. This is still the case here, and the fact that the reactivation delay has gone from 60 seconds up to 135 seconds, it's not the tripling that we saw of the extenders and the plates, but it is still more than double of what it used to be, from 60 seconds up to 135 seconds. It now means that that buff to your passive is obviously going to be bigger than the nerfs to the active, but that doesn't really bear saying. What we now see as well is that the activation time adjustment, this is the passive just for having it fitted, has gone from -4.5 up to -6.75. Again, that is a huge buff. That's like a 50% buff on the activation time adjustment here. So your weapons are going to be shooting faster, they're going to be doing a lot more damage whilst cold. Your cold DPS is going to go up dramatically if you're using these things. Well, the flip side of this is that you'll notice the activation damage bonus has gone away. They used to give a 9% bonus to your damage when you were activated. That's now the passive. It's worth noting that that didn't exactly stack before it replaced it. It went from the 5% to the 9%. Now you just have that 9% as the passive. This is why the patch notes said that damage bonus sort of was going away. It is. It's been incorporated into the passive version. The active, however, has also changed. It's gone from being a 400% boost on the -4.5, which is, again, you can kind of work that out, it's 400% more, so it's 4.5 times by 400%, which, I need a calculator. I should have one on screen here, shouldn't I? Oh, the test server doesn't allow me to do that. Okay, let me pull up a calculator super quick. This is one of those things I should have planned for ahead of time, but didn't think to. Where is it? There we are. Calculator of 4.5 times 400%. That gives us a total of, just trying to find the percent button, there we go, a total of 18. Whereas what we now have on live, we have -6.75, so 6.75 times by 100%. That means this time it is now 6.75, so that is a nerf overall there. You're not getting as much of a change to your heated DPS, but remember, that is a boost on top of an already bigger number. From testing that I've done so far, it isn't a big nerf. It's not a big nerf at all when it comes to activating one of these. If you have a gyro stabilizer, because your cold DPS has gone right the way up, the fact that the boost isn't as big anymore, it's a smaller boost on a bigger number, which kind of counterbalances it. What this does do is it stops you stacking multiple heat sinks or gyro stabilizers or magnetic field stabilizers or whatever, stacking multiple of them, activating them sort of in sync to keep basically the heated DPS as your cold DPS, because again, if you've got one of those active, it runs for 20 seconds, and then when it comes off, you activate the next one, and then that goes for 20 seconds, then you activate the next one, and that goes for 20 seconds, and the first one's off cooldown. You're basically running as if your hot DPS was your cold DPS, and it just requires a couple of button taps here and there. What this now does is it means that you can't do that. You are using these for a big boost. You're like kicking off your jet engines and going real crazy for your damage, but it goes on cooldown for a longer time after that, a full 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Which is a long time. That's a long time in combat sense. It just means you can't stack them and do as crazy things with them as you could before. So again, if you were using multiple of these modules, that's technically a nerf. Well, it's not technically a nerf. If you were using like multiple of these, it is a nerf. Ahoy there folks, Editing Benzie here, just jumping in that since I recorded this video, Hinari from Catskull has actually done some little charts and graphs that showcase this really, really nicely. Ultimately, this was done by using a test build Raven with 7 Pith C-type large missiles, no DPS, no rigs, no drones, no nanocore, nothing like that. It's literally just the ship with 7 C-type large missiles on it, battleship command at 5, and all missile skills, small, medium, and large at 554 to give a comparison. This showcases that the DPS of both of these is exactly the same on live and on the test server. If you fit one ballistic control unit, don't know why he calls them BCS, but there we go. Ballistic control unit goes from 1,301 up to 1,362, which is a 61.67 DPS increase. The same if you fit two ballistic control units, you're going up by 123 DPS from live compared to how it was on from the test server compared to how it was on live. This means that the passives are significantly buffed. It is a noticeable buff here. However, you will notice that when you are activating the ballistic control units, you're not getting the same overall DPS. This situation here is when you have one ballistic control unit fitted to this particular ship and you activate it, then you can see on live that was giving a result of 1,685. On the test server, it's 1,469, a drop of 216 DPS. That's a noticeable overall nerf, and it gets worse when you look at two ballistic control units. If you had two ballistic control units hot on this fit on the live server, that would give you 2,232. On the test, it's giving 1,736, an overall DPS drop of 496.03. It's worth noting again that obviously if you're using three ballistic control units, this gets even worse with a total drop possible of 732 DPS, although quite frankly, this is the entire point of the nerf, that no one should be fitting three ballistic control units to do this amount of DPS. Now, ultimately, there's a key point to be had here that yes, that is what happens during that activation, but does this buff counteract the drop in the DPS on activation? And well, he's plotted this as well. So here we have two ballistic control units, keeping one of them hot as possible, 3 minutes of sustained battle. This was live DPS. There it is, and there's a sudden drop down to here, coming back up again once those ballistic control units are there, because with two ballistic control units keeping one of them hot, there's going to be a period where both of them are on cooldown, which drops the DPS right the way down to here, which means for that period you're doing a lot less damage, noticeable drop there, whereas on the test server, because of the changes to passive, overall you're actually getting a nicer sort of difference here. And if you look at these two side by side, he has then basically calculated the area underneath these two lines to see what this means overall. And it means that over a 3-minute battle here, it's a 10% DPS loss using two ballistic control units. If you're using one ballistic control unit, it will actually be lower than this, a lower DPS loss. If you're using two ballistic control units, your fit is about to lose 10% overall DPS over a 3-minute battle. But what about using three ballistic control units? Well, that is overall a nerf. You can see here that there is ultimately a period here where it suddenly spikes on the live server, and you've got overall better DPS that then drops a little bit here on the test server. This is a total loss of 11%. Again, it's not humongous overall, but it is a noticeable nerf. The concept here is we don't want you to be stacking these ballistic control units or heat sinks or whatever, so we're going to nerf how these work. An 11 or 10% drop in DPS to me is not huge. Yes, that means it's going to take longer for you to complete anomalies or encounters, but remember, you're going to have commendations which allow you to re-earn bounty ticks each week as well, which should more than compensate for this change. I haven't run the exact numbers there, but ultimately you can see that the drops in DPS are not humongous across the board. They look bigger over a 38-second period than it actually works out to across an entire battle due to how that spikes. Again, thank you very much to Hinari for the full details on this one. Yeah, there we go, folks. Now at this point, I think it's worth addressing as well. One of the things that a complaint I've had a lot in regards to this change, that people are saying, oh, what this does is it makes Eve Echoes combat boring because it takes away all of the exciting button presses that I was making. And it's like, really, if you were using triple extenders, all you were doing was pressing a new button every 25 seconds. That's not exactly thrilling gameplay. And it's kind of the same with any of these. If you were stacking them, it's not thrilling gameplay. I'm sorry, you can't tell me that, oh, combat's getting dumber now because I just don't press buttons as often. The whole point of combat is knowing your ranges, it's knowing how to use your turrets. A lot of the draw of EVE isn't the combat itself directly, it's the preparation for combat and then knowing how to apply that against individual targets. So if you're the kind of person who sets something up and then puts it on just like, auto orbit, and you just kind of press one button every 25 seconds, that's not exciting gameplay, and don't try and, tell me that it is. It's not, and you're kidding yourself if you genuinely are trying to make that point. No one is sitting there going, oh, I don't get to press a button every 25 seconds now. If you want more engaging gameplay, take up a brawling thing rather than sitting there at a distance sniping and just cycling your extenders to never take any actual damage. There are ways to make the game more interesting. Extenders was never it. What this is doing is basically taking these passive modules, key in the name, passive modules, and actually making them predominantly passive. If you're using them as passive modules, they're getting better. If you were using them to prop up some weird tactics that weren't exactly meant to work the way they did, then you're getting nerfed. It's as simple as that. There was no reason that 3 extenders should have been better than running shield boosters. You're trying to active tank with passive modules, and that's just not good game design. So they've changed it, and I get that some people are a little bit disappointed that their playstyle is going away. But one of the discussions that came up on the Catskull Discord recently that really actually impressed me was, yeah, okay, so some of my playstyles are going away, but now I get to play with my ship fits again and figure out something else that works. I get to try new things, and that allows for a bit of a shake-up. It allows us all to get out there and go, okay, so what we had before was cool and all, but rather than looking at this as like doom and gloom and, oh, it's the end of the world, and my extender fit is now changing, yeah, good. You get to actually play around with a new fit. You get to try new things. How exciting is that? You don't even need to buy new ships. You don't even necessarily need to buy new modules. You've probably got a load of spare stuff kicking around. You just now get to play with fits, take it out and try it and see how that works. And that's a really positive way of looking at it, I think. Overall, though, I think the bottom line of this is that if you're using one or two of these modules for their intended passive purpose, you're getting buffed. You're getting significantly buffed in some cases. But if you were trying to stack them to do unintended things, then that is going to be nerfed. And I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. It does shake up a couple of the metas out there. As I said, the big one is the whole drone diving meta because of how powerful nightmares are in PvP. Yeah, that's going to be going away. That's going to be going away because the Nightmare is getting significant nerfs to its EHP thanks to the triple extender going away. The resistances of the shield field module have been dropped, so it's going to be reduced in its effectiveness there as well. Is your Nightmare going to be useless in PvP? No. It's still the best shield guardian. It's just not, lol, I press the bubble and then I press one button every 25 seconds and I never die. Now there's actual tactics, now there's actual engaging content going to be coming out of this, and I for one am all for that, but I know that there are going to be people watching this video who are going to troll me in the comment section down below and be like, oh no, it's awful. It's awful that my Nightmare is no longer an I win button. It's awful. Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Anyway, folks, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. I really like these changes. The armor plate one, I can see that some people might be a bit concerned about that, but everything else I think comes out really well balanced on this. I want to get more testing on this, but the first feeling I've had on this with the ships I've run and the combat anomalies and that I've done is that this is actually a really constructive change, and I like it. Anyway, folks, let me know your thoughts and opinions. Thank you for watching right the way to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!